So we made ourselves a very silly mistake. I drilled all of the countersinks on the wrong flipping side. Let me tell you guys, I could not be happier with how this thing turned out. It kind of gives me that same level of satisfaction as like a holographic Pokemon card. All right, let's get cracking. What is up, guys? 70 Savage here, coming at you today with another exciting video. Today we are going to be doing the ceiling inside the van. Now, I am especially excited for this particular project because this is one of those ones that you guys are going to be able to do on your own. This ceiling is going to be super simple with really easy to acquire materials, and it's going to be cheap, much cheaper than most of the things that we've done in this van. You can make this ceiling for about $300 all in. And if you are new to the channel, we have been converting this camper van right here in order to survive the zombie apocalypse. We have been doing everything inside this van DIY, everything from the electrical system, the plumbing and water system. We're gonna put some solar panels on the roof, and we've been documenting it every single step of the way. So if you are interested in seeing more of this content, slap that subscribe button below, join the Savage fam, and with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. So now for the interesting part, how are we actually going to be making this ceiling? We're only using two different materials. We're using aluminum flat bars and we are using wood. The wood that we are using are wooden planks, and there are really only two steps as far as making this ceiling. Step number one, we are going to attach the aluminum flat bars directly to these ribs in the van here. They're basically going to act as furring strips, as you might have seen in other installations. And then for step number two, all we have to do is take those wooden planks and screw them in directly to those aluminum quote-unquote furring strips. I know you probably already have questions, but do not worry. We will be getting into way more details as we start doing each one of these steps. So let's go ahead and get started with step number one. This step is going to entail putting these aluminum flat bars up against the ribs on the roof of the van. These flat bars are 2 inches wide. They're only 1/16 of an inch thick, and they're pretty flexible due to how thin they are, but they're thick enough where screws will bite into them very easily. Once they're attached, they're gonna look something like this, and what that's going to give us is a nice uniform surface to mount the wooden planks to. This will remove the need for us trying to gamble every time we try to screw one of those planks in, hoping that we avoid those holes that are in the factory roof ribs. The reason that I'm calling these furring strips is because most people will actually do this exact same thing with wood furring strips, actual furring strips. They'll screw them to the top of the roof ribs. Only reason that we're using this 1/16 inch thick aluminum is because it's basically a furring strip that's way thinner, so we can get extra headroom. If you guys didn't know, I'm 6'5", and I already don't have enough headroom in here, so we're trying to keep as much as we can possibly keep. I will put a link to these aluminum flat bars in the description below. So we're gonna be cutting these aluminum flat bars on our miter saw here. Let's get her done. All right, so it is now time to start screwing in the aluminum flat bars to the ceiling ribs. All right, first ceiling rib has been attached here. Couple things that I learned. These are number 4 screws, and this one broke off. But as for the strength or the holding power of these screws, it is actually very adequate. I mean, these ceiling planks are basically cardboard as far as how much they weigh. Last year, I actually held them up with magnets, and this is about probably 10 times or 100 times stronger than those magnets were. By the way, I will give an update to the magnetic ceiling towards the end of this video. So we have our aluminum flat bar down with all of the holes drilled in it. One thing that's very important with this ceiling project, you want to make sure that you label every single piece that you're doing. Next thing we are going to do is take our countersink bit and do a little bit of countersinking on every single one of the holes so that those countersink screws sit flush with this surface. So we've got this entire piece countersunk now. All of the screws are gonna fit nice and flush with the surface of the aluminum. It's finally time to take our fabricated, I guess, aluminum flat bar and mount it to the ceiling once and for all. So So we made ourselves a very silly mistake. We crossed out our original marking here, so I think you can see where this is headed. But basically, I drilled all of the countersinks on the wrong flipping side that needed to be on this side. Thankfully, it was pretty easy to salvage. All I had to do is actually just re-drill them about half as much pressure on the other side. And they're not quite as good. They're not gonna be perfect like they were on the other side, but it's a lot easier than kind of re-tapping all these holes. So now let's get to mounting this thing for the final time. All right, so we got our first rib done here. It turned out pretty good. There are a couple of missing screws because if you countersink both sides, it tends to be really easy to drill too big of a hole. So now I am going to do the rest of these roof ribs here. It is going to be exactly the same process as this first one I showed you guys. So funny enough, the first time you do something, it's way harder than the next times you do something. The next 4 of these came out absolutely perfect. On all 3 of the rest of these, we had 0 mistakes. They all worked out flawlessly and it was way easier. There was just a couple small lessons to learn on that first one there. So this is a 170 non-extended Sprinter van. We put 1 aluminum furring strip on the back rib. We skipped a rib. We put another one right here. We skipped a rib. We put a 3rd one right above the galley unit here. And then our last one is the first one that we put up. It's the frontmost roof rib that you can see. So now we have 4 lengths of roof ribs that are 100% mountable. We do not have to worry about screwing in and not having that screw bite. And most importantly, the boring part is officially over. Now it is time for step 2 of the roof project. We are actually going to start cutting and mounting our wood planks to these roof ribs. We are going to start down the middle and work our way outwards. These are actually really easy to find. I bought them at my local Lowe's. I'll put a link to them in the video description below. It is also very important to note that these are tongue and groove planks. So there's a tongue on one side of the planks and then a groove on the other side that the tongue slides into. That's what allows the ceiling to sit really, really flush along the width of the whole thing. Because they are 1/4 inch and they're softwood, they're super, super lightweight. For these ceiling planks, these are just the perfect material. So like I mentioned before, we are starting down the center of the van. Make sure that it's lined up nice and straight, which is actually pretty important because everything else is gonna be based off of this one. As for the screws that we chose to use, these are stainless steel number 6 by 1/2 inch screws. One tip about this particular wood, this wood is super, super soft. It's pine, therefore you can kind of just screw the screw in and it will countersink itself. And the final thing you have to take into consideration is drilling out the holes for the lights. Now the lights that I use make this very, very simple. All that you have to do is take your hole saw, drill a hole out, and then the light mounts directly into it. By the way, I will put a link to these lights and to the hole saw in the description below. So now that our first one is in, it is time to repeat this process. We're basically going to start cutting these down to kind of a random length and screwing them up into the aluminum furring strips that we made. Let's go ahead and get cracking. So I am very stoked, y'all. We have finished cutting and mounting all of the ceiling panels. They turned out looking absolutely fantastic in my opinion. It is now time to pull all of these ceiling planks back down so that we can sand them nice and smooth and then apply our finish. If only it took as long to make and mount the panels as it did to just take them down. By the way, this gas mask is not for the construction, it is for the smoke. I moved to Tahoe a few weeks ago and I've seen about 2 clear skies since I moved here. And for reference, this is how much scrap material I ended up with. I'd say about 20% of the boards either I messed up on or were too warped to use and have it still look good. I'm using a 220 grit sandpaper in a random orbital sander. And now let's get to the sanding. So we are almost there, guys. This is one of the final steps. We are going to seal all of these wood planks on both the front and the back to prevent them from molding over time, and also to give them a little bit of a hardened finish so they resist scratches and nicks. So this right here is everything that we are going to need to finish these. I have a whole gallon of this water-based polyurethane. This is actually my favorite finish to use on any wood. I also use this on like my butcher block countertops. I use this on the ceiling in the last fan. As far as applying this stuff, I use a regular 4-inch foam roller. I use the ultra fine ones. This right here is what's called a tack cloth. It's basically just a sticky piece of fabric that you can use to wipe up all of the dust in between each one of your coats. Always start with the side that doesn't matter. In this case, this is the back side, the side that's screwed up directly touching the ceiling ribs. We're going to do 2 coats on the back side and then 3 coats on the front side. On the front side, in between each one of the coats, I'm going to lightly hand sand it with that 220 grit sandpaper. Before we start, I have to emphasize how freaking thankful I am to have a workshop of this size living in Tahoe. So blessed to be doing this while it's raining ash outside, and I literally wouldn't be able to proceed unless I had a workshop like this. Part of this is because of all of you guys watching these videos and all of y'all who are subscribed to the channel, so I really appreciate it. All right, let's get cracking. So we have finished all of the coats of polyurethane on our ceiling planks, and we are ready to mount them back into the van. I'm stoking because this finish turned out looking absolutely beautiful. It added the perfect amount of sheen to these planks and turned out super smooth. It also gave the grain a little bit more depth. That's kind of hard to see on camera. It kind of gives me that same level of satisfaction as like a holographic Pokemon card. It is finally time to take all of our wooden planks and attach them to the ceiling of the van for the final time, hopefully. Let me tell you guys, I could not be happier with how this thing turned out. It looks absolutely stunning, especially in real life when you can see the depth of the wood. Not to mention, it matches the color scheme of our van perfectly. I guess from your guys' perspective, that might not be true because my imagination is kind of filling in all of the gaps with the stuff that I have yet to do. So I am 6'5". I can almost stand completely straight in here. Not quite. I do have a slight kink to the old head. But when I go underneath the max fan, I can stand completely straight, which is not something I could do in my last van. Between the low profile floor and super thin ceiling, this is the most space you're gonna be able to get reasonably in a Sprinter van. You do not need this many lights. In my last van, I just had one strip of lights down the middle. I did feel like that was a little bit too dim, but I do feel like these are gonna be more bright than most people probably need. So somewhere in the middle of those might be what you wanna shoot for, but if you lean on the side of more and use the dimmer switch, you're gonna be good. Now that we're talking about lighting, I do have one more decision to make, and I want your guys' opinion. You may have noticed that there are 2 different colors of lights. We have the silver ones in the front of the van, and then we have the white lights in the back of the van. I do not know which ones I want to go with. So for those of you that care, let me know whether you like the white lights or the silver lights. Using screws as a mounting mechanism for the ceiling turned out way better than expected. And to be honest, it's actually not that ugly. They're pretty hard to notice. Some of you guys might be here from last year's video where we made a very similar ceiling with almost the exact same wooden planks, but instead of mounting them with screws, we used magnets to stick them to the steel ribs inside the van. And at the time, I was so excited about that solution because you couldn't see any screw holes. Those things were super easy to pop in and out. But after 2 years, the current owners of the van who bought it from me said that the ceiling fell down.
No, God! No, God, please, no!
Surprisingly, the weakest link in that solution was not the actual magnets. The magnets were still stuck to the roof even when the ceiling fell. What failed in that solution was the epoxy. Even though we had sanded down each magnet individually to try and increase the odds that the epoxy would adhere to it well, over time, that epoxy just detached and did not stick to the magnets. So I left a comment pinned to the very top of that video, hopefully informing people that they're gonna need to take a little bit of a different approach if they try and copy that solution. That being said, in the future, I will probably just use screws as it's way simpler, and I really don't think it looks that bad. And before we skip to the super sexy montage of this finished ceiling, if you like the video, slap that like button below. If you like this content and wanna see more content that I make in the future, slap the subscribe button below. That's really what motivates me to keep making these videos. I know I'm a bit of a social media whore, but if you like and subscribe, it will help push this video out to more people so that they can also learn the same stuff you just did. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let's skip to the montage, and I will see you guys next time.